Thank you for joining us on our journey here to preserve the history of mixed martial arts. When I wanted to take on this project, I needed help. I brought in one of my favorite matchmakers, Miguel Iturrate, and the MMA detective, Mike Davis. So to do this, we've been able to preserve history. Welcome and enjoy.
Hey, Miguel Iturrate back here on the Lights Out podcast. We got the MMA detective, as always, off to the side here, Mike Davis. And we're off on another deep dive. We're going to have Chris Lytle join us with our latest victim. Mike, who we got?
Well, this is what we're going to do. But sometimes in history, you come across people that have their hands in literally everything, and incredibly significant, historically significant things. And Chris Brennan, the Westside Strangler, falls into that category. So Chris Brennan, this is what's going on, ladies and gentlemen. We do an interview. We get our hands like elbow deep in a grime. We pull out stuff. And then other people are now recording, like trying to contact those people about trying to get the same sound bites we did. And then just kind of like playing with the Google algorithms, which we know absolutely nothing about. So with Chris Brennan, this is going to be a multi-part series where every other week we're going to be uploading a segment, maybe 2.5 hour segment of our interview with him. And I have a feeling that this is probably going to go about 4, maybe 5 weeks. So it's going to be a multi-part series. So that's where we got Miguel, Chris Brennan. On top of that, thank you for that segue, Miguel. I appreciate that little cue in right there. Bet DSI.
You know me, I worry.
Right. BetDSI.eu. If you use our promo code LIGHTSOUT, they give you 50% cash bonus all the way up to $1,000. Please BetDSI.eu if you want to support us in this show. That would be a great idea. February 5th, I am in Tampa, Florida. Jiu-Jitsu guys, please register on Smooth Comp. It's World Class Grappling, February 5th in Tampa, Florida. And I think that's it. That's what I got on my plate right now. I got a couple other things in the works right now. One pretty significant, but I'm not going to unveil that until it's on paper, black and white. Miguel.
I just want to give a quick shout out to our Spotify and iTunes fans, everybody downloading the podcast. We're starting to get an audience that we're becoming familiar with out there.
Significant.
So thank you very much. And for the YouTube fans, the guys on YouTube that are watching us, let us know about these backgrounds. We're trying something new here just to make it easier on the eyes and stuff. Everything like all mishmashed and stuff. Now we got uniform backgrounds. I don't know if that's appealing. So make a comment on them and you let us know and we'll figure it out. We're going to have them going here for a couple of these interviews while we gather feedback. But definitely let me know, because if not, we won't do this. But I don't know. It looks good, Mike. I like it.
I do. Let me give you, guys. This guy was involved with the Gracies from day one, moved to Brazil, had huge fallouts and makeups with people like Marc Laimon. I don't know what exactly we're all going to cover on this episode, the first one, but we're going to get as far as possible, probably take it 2 hours. And then on our next one, we'll take it another couple. So that's where we're at.
Here we go. It's Chris Brennan time.
Okay, everyone, deep dive time. Our favorite thing to do, once again, going old school. And this is hard to do, go older school than me. I started my journey in 1998. This young gentleman started in 1993. Oh, my God. Right after the UFC started. I can't wait to hear how this started. Ladies and gentlemen, Chris Brennan. Chris, how the hell are you, buddy?
Good, man. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. But I didn't know you started that much before me, man. That's crazy. So how did that come about? And can you give me your background before you even got involved with fighting? Were you a skateboarder? Were you a wrestler? What were you?
I was a troublemaker. I was the guy that says, jiu-jitsu saved my life, MMA saved my life. I don't know that it saved my life, but it sure kept me out of a lot of trouble. I was bodybuilding. I was walking around like 220 as a teenager, and I just stopped bodybuilding and was just bouncing at a bar with Todd Medina and Todd Medina actually fought in UFC 5.
Oh, yeah.
And Kimo worked at a bar right around the corner, and he fought in UFC 3. So I saw the first UFC on television at the bar we were bouncing at, and I sought out somewhere to train the very next day and started training.
So where was there to train back then? I mean, you were in California then, correct?
Yeah. So I started in a guy's garage named Ken Gabrielson, and he had been under Royce Gracie. I had been with, I only trained them a short time, and then I realized that Royce was in Torrance, which was 45 minutes from my house. And he was the person obviously who got me into the sport by watching him beat up on some big guys, and I was like, well, they're fighting in a cage, they're not getting arrested, they're getting paid, and I'm going to try to go this route. So I walked into a boxing gym first, actually, and was the guy that I hate coming in my gym now and be like, I want to fight in the UFC. And I had no formal background training at all. I did get in a lot of fights growing up. I was born in Compton, and I was raised between Bear and Huntington Beach. And so it was like, on one side of where I grew up on my grandparents, it's Black and Mexican. Where I grew up around with my parents was like skaters, skinhead, surfers, complete polar opposites, but I was back and forth all the time. And so I got in a lot of fights. And then, so seeing the UFC, I started training, walked into a boxing gym and told them I want to fight in the UFC. They put me in the boxing ring right then, and about 16 seconds in, my nose got splashed all over my face from a 16-year-old kid who ended up winning the Junior Olympics. But
Nice.
From that point on, I was set. I knew I wanted to do it, and couldn't breathe out of my nose for the rest of my career.
So they threw you in deep water like that just to kind of see if you'd come back.
Right.
It's not a bad idea. I mean, it is what it is.
We still do it now.
There's definitely two theories of you either bring people along really slow or you throw them right in the deep water.
Depends how they come in, I guess.
Yeah, and the problem is when you bring them along slow, sometimes it's 6 months down the line before you figure out this guy's not a fighter. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's good to know that right away, know what you're dealing with.
Right.
The problem is in today's softer, gentler world, you might have to deal with some lawsuits. But
Right.
Hey, how was the first day you walked into the Torrance Academy? What was that like? In the hoist?
It was cool. I walked in. I'd already gone to John Lober and Ken Gabrielson, and so I'd already rolled for 6 months, 5 months, and so I had already been humbled. Right, I already knew how to walk in the gym, and I went in, completely humble, and there was good guys there. There wasn't a lot of killers yet, but there was some good guys there. And Royce was there every day. Me and Royce actually became friends. I used to get a 5-minute roll with him every day. And so that helped a lot. Was
Rob Kahn coming in at that point too?
Yeah, I don't know that he was there, but he was definitely there when I was there.
Okay.
Good guy. Love that guy.
Yeah, funny. Yeah, funny guy.
Yeah,
we interviewed him
very
already.
funny.
Yeah. So who else was in the gym with you at that point?
Well, so me and Marc Laimon, I started, I was there for a while. Then Marc showed up. Me and Marc moved into a Days Inn hotel room together and took all the furniture out and just matted the living room of the hotel room and trained every day. And Marc was another diehard kid. He came from Wisconsin, had never had any formal training, just off of videos. And I want to say he got his blue belt in like a couple days. I was already a blue belt when he got there, but he got it really fast when he got there. So he was already, he had trained with some friends, but never had an instructor until he got there. Lowell Anderson, Ethan Milius, John Crouch that owns the lab in Arizona, Phil Magalese, he's on the East Coast. There was Mauricio Zangano, he was one of my best friends. He was there, when I was there. A lot of guys. Henner and Huron were yellow belts.
That's wild. Yeah, it's there's a lot of history back then, and people would make incredible sacrifices to make the trek to work out there when they weren't from, California. And, you obviously listed a few. So after UFC 1, you had said it inspired you to go find training. And you trained from like what, 93, 94 with Royce?
Yeah.
Was there like a lot of people coming in just to watch him work out as well, based on what took place on TV?
Yeah. We used to get a lot of people that would come in. He still was getting challenge matches a lot, you know, and he fought, I think he might have only fought two while I was there, but the students fought a lot. You know, he would make them fight them, and if they won or something, then he would fight them, but they never beat the students. So, but he did fight a couple while I was there. And there were a lot of guys like Dave Camarillo. You remember Dave Camarillo?
Of course.
He came in one day, you know, and threw Royce on his ass. They started from the feet and threw him on his ass. They went back, and then he choked him. Royce choked him. Then they went back to feet. He went to throw him again, and Royce took his back in the air and choked him by the time it hit the ground. But we were all sitting against the wall like, oh my God, like, because you hadn't seen anyone do anything really to Royce yet, you know, and he tossed him, and but then Royce choked him fast. And that's kind of when I knew that there was a difference. Everyone's always fighting that judo and jiu-jitsu, or jiu-jitsu came from judo and whatever, but as blue belts, a lot of us were tapping judo black belts, you know. So I was like, it's not the same, right? Because a jiu-jitsu black belt will tap me quickly, you know, in the gi when I was a blue belt, and we're still, you know, guys were going back and forth with judo black belts. So there was a big difference once it was on the ground.
So just so people understand, what you're saying here earlier was like people would actually come to the gym and challenge to a real fight hoist or students, and you'd really fight there and you'd lose, or people would lose to them, and they'd be like, okay. So that was a real thing. Not all the fights happen in the octagon, is what you're saying. Oh, no. So I don't think a lot of people understand what you mean by, what do you mean he fought there? Yeah, they would fight there.
Yeah, they had a standing challenge match. Kind of that's how they got started. I think even before the UFC, but it continued after the UFC. And guys like Lowell Anderson, I don't know if you know who he is. He's out of Idaho. He's really good. He used to fight all those a lot. Joe Pardo. Joe was a cop in LA, but has also fought in the UFC a little bit. And some guys like that, some bigger. Low was little, but some big guys, you know, John Burke would fight, and they just have, you know, no one with any skill really came in to fight. A couple kids with some high school wrestling, maybe.
Spencer Fisher did.
He did?
Yeah, Spencer Fisher said he lost a couple times. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Hey,
go ahead.
There was one guy that came from Vegas, real athletic black guy, was a good striker, and that's when, you know, we were getting ready because we're waiting for Royce to pick which one of us gets the fight, and he came jogging down the stairs in a Speedo. And he fought in a Speedo, no gi. And I was like, oh shit, he must be serious today, you know, because he wasn't wearing his gi. And he mounted this guy and gift wrapped him and just slapped the crap out of him and then choked him. And the guy didn't want to fight again. But yeah, I was, like I told you before, I had gotten in a lot of street fights, and I didn't stop for a while once I started learning jiu-jitsu, you know what I mean? Like, I'd gotten a lot of fights before jiu-jitsu. And then once I started training, me, Marc Laimon, Mauricio Zangano, Henry Akins, Henry's brother, Matt, and another guy, Brock from Hickson's, all used to go out all the time, and we used to get in fights all the time. And then it was just like, okay, this isn't really fun, because it was just like watching hoist, right? Like, no one, if you don't train how to counter a choke or counter an armbar or any of that, you have no idea. So it's like literally that easy. And I was like, okay, we're going to hurt somebody, you know.
You're going to end up in jail. But, you know, also you got to, you know, Chris Lytle, you also got to imagine you're paying dues to go to a gym, and every single time you go there, you might have to physically fight somebody from the street.
Yeah, and like, we were suckers, man. Me and Laimon and a couple of those guys were in the instructor program. So we were paying $650 a month to be there. We had to be there from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. with a small break in the middle. We were cleaning toilets, cleaning showers, mopping mats, assisting every class. Like, that was every day we were doing that at that gym. They had a system that was ideal for Horian.
Wow.
Well, and just to go back a step, you mentioned John Delcio. Was that Delcio? Was the original? Like, I remember, I know that name from like VHS challenge matches. I don't know they were official Gracie matches, but he had VHS matches in garages and shit too.
He used to fight in that cage combat in San Pedro, California, the Cajas deal.
Oh, okay.
He used to fight there a lot. I don't know if you know Kaja. Kaja was John Matua's coach, the Kapo Kimbi Kalua, the Hawaiian stuff.
Okay. I remember the cage combat name. I didn't remember. I don't know John Matua's relation to it, but yeah, interesting stuff. Those old days with the Dog Brothers.
Yeah. So Chris, your first fight is January 5th, 1996 in California. There's no event name. There's no promoter. You're listed that I could find. Scott Carter is your opponent. You win in the first round by like a super rare submission, the Peruvian necktie.
Woof, really?
So you go 3 years without training, without fighting. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Is that your legit first fight?
No, I had at least 4, maybe 5 more of those before that fight. So here's the thing. I started training with Ken and those guys. And before I even got to the Gracie Academy, I was training with Kimo and Joe Son. Joe Son was the money maker, right? Like he was the guy who literally pushed to get everyone in the UFC. But we were training at a place called the Thunder Center in California. And it was just a big gym where Calvary Chapel wrestled. And me, Kimo, Joe, John Lober, I got started training. And I got him into that gym. And the guy, Randy Ziegler, who I was telling you that got the privates and from Hickson. And that story will come up here in a little bit. But we were all training in this one room. So even though I was going to the Gracie Academy, we were coming back and training together with these guys because they all wanted to be fighters. And Horian wasn't keen on me fighting.
Why?
I mean, if you look back, no one's ever fought out of their gym. I think they wanted one rock star and that was it.
Wow.
Do you think they just kind of wanted to help more than anything?
They wanted to help what?
Cleaning the toilets, teaching the classes.
Yeah, but I mean, they wanted to spread jiu-jitsu and teach jiu-jitsu and make money, obviously. But
money.
Everyone feared so much someone losing because at that time, technically no one had lost representing jiu-jitsu. And I think the first one was like Amaury Batech when he fought Don Fry. And that was the first time like a public, big thing had happened where one of them lost. And so they were. That
was a savage fight. In my opinion, It's a 2-round fight. In my opinion, it should be on the UFC short list for Hall of Fame fights. Yeah, Amaury Batech versus Don Fry. Amaury Batech is this person that I think they put all their eggs in one basket. And then they saw what the American wrestler could do with some submission defense. It was the first time. Yeah.
Chris, I was wondering when you said you signed up for an instructor like course or like curriculum at $650 a month. I'm assuming that's not $6.50 either, right?
No, $650.
But did you feel at some point like they were holding back on you, like in teaching and stuff? Because there's always that kind of reputation or that aura where it's like, there's some mystery jiu-jitsu that they weren't giving it all away, or maybe, how did that exchange go? How did you feel?
100%. That's not even an opinion. That's a fact. They would teach to pass the guard by putting your hand on the bicep, sliding your hand in between, coming up and stacking them up and pass. And they would teach you that forever. And then you would move on to the intermediate class and get triangled by everybody. And like, Horian, I'm getting triangled, here. No. Just posture. Try to triangle me. You couldn't triangle him, so he would make it work. So then after it happened a little bit, he goes, no. You don't want to pass like that. Tuck your elbow in, then go underneath and then pass. Right. So now 6 months later, he's breaking habits that he's created the entire time to drag you along. And he's had so many things like that where he would show you one way for a certain amount of time. And then once it started, it was a basic to them, you started losing because of it. Then they would change it and you had to now break a habit that you had been, repeating over and over and over again. They would show you the key lock on the left side for a month until they showed it to you on the right side. Everything was very slow. And it ended up getting exposed pretty quickly because the Machado's gym was right down the road and they had an inter-school match between the two. And I don't know that the Gracie Academy won one match. and they got kind of wiped out. They brought in a guy, Kaiki, and Kaiki started teaching at the Gracie Academy. This is the first real outside guy that I'd seen teach there. And he would show some real advanced stuff. And you would hear Horian call him on the loudspeaker. He had a loudspeaker in the rooms because there was cameras. And he would call him to his office, and he would get in trouble for teaching the technique, and he'd have to back up and show something more basic. So they really went out of their way to drag their feet on teaching. And I look at what I say is a good teacher is somebody who teaches really well, helps you learn, helps you get better, helps you whatever. But Horian, as far as like teaching a technique, was a masterful teacher. Like he could teach a technique really, really well. He could explain it really well in detail. So once I made the decision that I wasn't going to be there anymore, I stayed for a couple months and just studied him teaching over and over again. I'd study him teach any technique and just then carried that over to the higher level stuff that I was learning to teach later to my students and how to teach. But I don't look at him, looking back now, I don't look at him being a good teacher because he wasn't a good teacher as far as helping people get, much better. But he did help me be a better teacher.
Well, really, all they're really trying to do is help, line their pockets. Really, they were wanting to keep you along and keep you not showing enough. So it would take you. Here's the thing I've realized: you get some guys who are, good, but all they want to show you is enough to make sure they always know a little bit more than you. And I've noticed that when you get guys who aren't like, they'll train in our gym for a year and then they open their own gym. I'm like, you don't know anything. What are you teaching? I find out they're just teaching a little bit and not giving them the knowledge like you're talking about. That's how people do who don't, even though they did know a lot. But if if you're paying $650 a month, I'm probably dragging you along too. I want to get it 10 years out of it. I mean, why not? So it's unfortunate, man, because that's not the goal. The goal is to try and get people as good as possible. And then the better you get, the better they make you. It's just a different way of thinking, I guess.
Yeah, no, for sure. At the time, we were all so new and so still in awe of Royce that I wanted that certificate at the end, saying that I was an instructor from the Gracie Academy. And at that point, that was a big deal to me until me and Marc Laimon had a sit down at our apartment one day and came to the conclusion that, hey, we're probably getting played. And that was the end of it for us.
So with Scott Carter, you landed a Peruvian necktie.
So they listed as a Peruvian necktie. It was sort of a Japanese necktie. It was similar to a Peruvian. I didn't even put it in there as a Peruvian necktie, but it was my grip was a 10-finger grip on his neck, which was like long before the 10-finger was even a thing, just because of how I was choking when I choked him.
Huh. That's interesting.
It wasn't like a planned Peruvian necktie.
I tell you what, like if you're scouting somebody and you see that on their record and it's their first fight, it's going to make a lot of people say no to a potential bout.
Well, back then, I think people have been like, they're making up moves. That's not a real thing. I didn't even know people knew what that was back in the 90s. I really didn't.
Yeah, they might need a Brazilian necktie. Peru. Yeah.
Peru.
Well, Chris got a win by rear naked choke that was actually kind of like a smush with the forearm, and that's it.
Yeah, I did.
From back in those old days.
So do you remember how much you were getting paid at that point?
I didn't get paid.
Okay. How were the sanctions and stuff like that with participating in an event like this?
Joe was setting these fights up. We were doing them in gyms. We were doing them in a bar in San Pedro. We were doing them in a bar in Huntington Beach, and then a couple inside the gyms that we were at.
So it was a wrestling ring, like a boxing ring,
wrestling mat, probably.
Wrestling mat.
Yeah, it was in the ring.
Wow.
You mentioned San Pedro a couple of times, and I know you're an old school guy. Do you ever run into Mike Bitonio?
No, I met him once a long time ago. At me and Militich, before we fought, he was in Extreme Fighting Battlecade, and I was an alternate to fight him or Matt Hume or John. I want to say John Lewis or Kenny Monday, or John Lewis or Kenny Monday. And we didn't end up fighting, but I met Mike Bitonio there. But I'd never met him anywhere else, and I knew that he was another guy that was from Kaja who trained John Matu. I forgot all about Mike.
rest in
What was the name
peace,
of that
but-
thing he fought in? Mars Reality Fighting or
No,
something?
I think he did one of the other one. He did the one that Henzo won, the tournament
Yeah.
that Henzo won.
When he
I-
upkicked Oleg in the face?
Oh,
No. This was the three that when he finished when he fought James Waring in the finals.
Oh, and he
believe-
stepped on the judo guy's head?
Yes, I think that's
Yeah,
the one. And Vale fought Bitonio and couldn't continue because of kind of a heroic performance. So sorry, Mike, take over. I'm sorry.
No, we're good. No. This is what kind of makes little interviews like this special. All right, so you're. I mean, I don't know about these dates, but it says January 5th was your first one. That's what we just talked about. Your next one's January 24th, 1996 in Mississippi.
Yeah.
So you either fought 2 times or you fought in a 4-man tournament.
No, I fought 2 times.
Okay, was it a 4-man tournament or you just volunteered to fight a second time?
Wait, are you saying they're on the same date?
Yeah, because what happened was like Steve Oliver is your second fight. I couldn't find a first fight for him, but I've got 2 fights for you. So I'm just assuming,
No, we didn't.
You volunteered to fight twice.
Unless there's a mistake on the fight record.
Did you fight twice that day?
No.
Okay, well then that's it. There's 2 different fights. So you got Randall Camp, winner first round, armbar 135, and you got Steve Oliver, winner 1 round rear naked choke. What do you recall about either of those fights?
I got kicked really hard in the body on the feet with Steve Oliver. And that was really it as far as getting hit. I the first few fights I didn't even get hit because the guys were like more specialists, like striking specialists, and didn't have any ground. So it was like wait, close the distance, take them down, and get it done. I didn't have any like brawls back then, any big fights until I fought Pat. Everybody else was pretty easy fight because they were special. They were strikers versus me. Same thing. The fight in Brazil was a karate or a kickboxer guy with no grappling, and I beat him easy. So it wasn't until, those fights were pretty, they were set up for us to go in there and fight against the other style and show that basically the jiu-jitsu was jiu-jitsu.
Okay. So you're mentioning Joe Son setting up all these fights. How was Horian with you fighting at this point?
So Horian didn't know I was fighting until my Militich fight. Like these fights weren't sanctioned. I wasn't. They weren't on a video or anything like that. Actually, a couple of them are on VHS, but they weren't like produced like Extreme Challenge was. So me and Horian didn't have our thing until the Militich fight came up.
So I thought were you not training? Were you still training with Horian then? I thought you said you were leaving there, but you were still training with him then.
When I started fighting?
Yeah.
I trained there for a little bit when I had my first couple fights, but so in 95, I went to Brazil until 96. And so I wasn't there at the Gracie Academy then. And then I went back to the Gracie Academy a little bit when I got back. And then the story happens with me and Laimon and everybody leaving.
Okay. All right. So here, we'll do it chronologically. 96, you moved to Brazil. What made you move there? Where did you go?
So I met a guy. So before I left, I had been training. I was living in Orange County, training with a guy, Mark Eckert and Dave Kama, who are Hickson Gracie brown belts. I would train with them in the nighttime. And so this is after I think it was after I was in the instructor program. I was training there and driving to the morning class at the Gracie Academy for a while. Then I came back and met a guy who, I forget his name. He had a brother that lived in Brazil. This guy was Brazilian, had a brother that lived in Brazil. And I had been talking about wanting to go. There wasn't a lot, and I'm not like boasting, there wasn't a lot of good jiu-jitsu guys at that time that actually wanted to fight. There was a couple of good guys in the room, who were good in the gi. But what happened was one day, and I already knew I wanted to fight, and I had been doing some small things. But one day, Royce comes downstairs and says, "Hey, everybody take off your gi tops. We're going to go open hand strikes and do rounds like that." And I was like, "Oh, shit, okay, cool." Well, there was a brown belt and a purple belt who beat me regularly in the gi. And when we took it off and went open hand, I destroyed everybody. Like,
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Really
It's a
easy
difference.
for me. It just came natural to me. So right then, I left and I went home and I'm just kind of sitting there like, wow, you know, that was way different. And so at that point, I made the decision. I didn't want to train. I knew I had to train gi because of where I trained, but I didn't want to train gi. But all I wanted to get at that point was I wanted to learn and I wanted to fight. And so that put me down the path of my no-gi career and helped me make a decision fighting wise. But sorry, I got off track. What started that question?
All right, so Brazil, where did you go?
Oh, so anyway, the guy's brother lived in Brazil, and this guy said, yeah, I can put you in contact with him if you want. And I said, yeah, please. So he gives me his number. I call him, and within a week and a half period, oh, that's what I was saying. There wasn't a lot of good guys to train with that wanted to fight. So when I talked to this guy, he's like, yeah, come down and train. So I went within a week and a half period of time. I sold my car, made 10 grand. I packed 4 duffel bags. I bought a ticket to Brazil and I flew to Brazil by myself. I got in a cab and I went to Alliance, Jacare's gym in Rio. And
Jacare Cavalcante.
Yeah.
Okay.
I walked in with 4 duffel bags and spoke 0 Portuguese. And
I'm moving
like,
in.
hey, yeah, where are your
Translate
friends?
that.
Where are your friends? I was like, no, I'm by myself. And so I slept on the mat with a sheet and a pillow. And I lived out of a small square locker. But what I didn't know, because I was dumb at the time, I planned on staying for like a month or 2, and just spending as much money as I could on privates and getting everything I could. Well, at the time, $1 was like 6 or 7 reals. So I had like 60 grand, 65 grand. So I stayed for a year. I came over Christmas and I went back.
He bought a village.
Yeah.
Well, why did you not ask anybody like Horian or Royce in the gym about going to Brazil to one of the Gracie affiliates? Because by going to Alliance, it can be seen as like a sign of disrespect.
Right. So to be honest, I wasn't. I was kind of the outcast at that gym. I wanted to fight. I was the guy that asked Royce, who hit you the hardest? Who was your hardest fight? And everyone's like, oh, don't ask him that, But I looked at him as a normal guy, not, like I thought he was awesome, but I didn't idolize him, or anybody really. I wanted to be that guy, right? So I wasn't. I kind of stood out as far as Horian was always like, Chris, do this, don't do that, and always trying to get on me about stuff. So I just found a guy, and wasn't really concerned with it, and went down there and trained. When I came back, I was at the Gracie Academy for a short time, and then I was under Franchina, who came from the same gym as I was at in Brazil.
Did they know the Gracies? They know you were training with Joe Son and Kimo. Did they know you're training with those guys at the same time?
No,
they would not have liked that. Would they? It's like the enemy, actually. Wasn't Kimo there?
Yeah. So Royce and Kimo hadn't fought yet.
Oh, okay. Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I wasn't in the instructor program yet. The instructor program came later. Right now, I'm just going down there and training.
Okay.
When we're talking about before that fight. And I was training, there. A couple other places. I was just doing like classes here and there. But Kimo was paying a guy, Randy Ziegler, for privates. I'm sorry. He was paying Randy Ziegler to take privates from Rickson. Randy would then come back and teach Kimo what he learned. And then in UFC 3, walking through the lobby, Kimo is walking through the lobby, Rickson and all those guys are walking the other way, and Randy was with Kimo, and Rickson and him made eye contact, and it all kind of came together. Ended up being a big old ordeal in the lobby. And and if you watch that fight, like Kimo had Royce's back with both hooks in for a little bit. He had, being so giant and athletic and knowing just enough, he caused a serious problem.
Yeah. Hey, if he would have had his head shaved, he might have won that fight.
True.
He had it shaved after that.
Now, our Davey told us a story that at some point after the match, Kimo actually showed up at the Gracie Academy asking for for you know a little bit of
A
training
rematch.
or a rematch? Is that what it was?
Yeah.
Why don't you tell your end of the story?
Yeah, I don't know all of it, but I do know he came in and asked for, he wanted to fight him again. He wanted a rematch, and he did cut his hair, and wanted to fight him again, and that never happened. And then what did happen, unfortunately for Kimo, is he then went to Joe Moreira and started learning jiu-jitsu, and it made him worse for a while because he then wasn't the unpredictable, massive guy. He was then started becoming pretty technical, and you know, there was a while where he wasn't quite as much of a threat. And like when he fought Ken Shamrock, right, he was way more calm and doing something. Ken Shamrock was kind of rolling around underneath him until he got him in a knee bar. But Kimo was just, he had that edge at the beginning and was a little bit wild and unpredictable and didn't know what he was going to do. And that's what made him difficult. You know, the more jiu-jitsu you teach somebody, the better. You know, I'd much rather wrestle with a purple belt than a white belt.
So with Kimo, for instance, like you're explaining about a guy that's a bouncer. Joe Son is the money guy. Who knows what he's doing? But
Went to jail for raping a dude.
I think he went to jail for a gang rape of a woman and went in jail, raped a dude, and then killed a cellmate.
Okay.
I think, you know what I mean? It was in there. It's just not
It's all possible here. It's all possible.
He crossed that line either way, you know, went the Brett Rogers route.
Strange guy.
How does he get the money to pay for privates for Hickson for somebody else, which is
Kimo?
very smart, I might add.
Kimo?
Yeah.
Pretty sure Joe was paying for everything. Kimo, I don't want to get into his personal life, but he did a lot of drugs. He partied a lot, you know, and whether he sold drugs or not, I don't know. But Joe was always driving around in like crazy Benzes and stuff like that. He had money before all this, and I don't know from what. No idea.
What was it like hanging out with Joe Son?
I mean, I tried not to. I only saw him at the gym, only trained him at the gym. Sometimes at Powerhouse weightlifting gym in Huntington Beach, I would see him outside, and that's kind of how we met and got started anyway, because I was friends with Kimo, and then Joe was there and whatnot. But yeah, I didn't spend a lot of time with him.
I was there once when he fought in Japan for the Pride Day. He was a straight nut, man. He showed up, literally drove straight to the fight from the airport. He missed his flight, showed up the day of the fight, and went there, had like I showed. I had no cup on. I'm like, dude, if anybody in this world needs to have a cup, it's you. You got. I mean, Keith Hackney hit you about 15 times in the nuts. They made him put a cup on. He had this thong on. It was nuts. And just talking to him, something was wrong with that guy, man. He was not all there.
He was definitely not
crazy.
all there.
I was like, oh, man, this guy's on a different planet.
You know, while we're talking about some of the crazies, and you mentioned John Lober. Now, where did he come from? Because this dude's about as hardcore as you get from back in the old days. You know,
I have a great story about John Lober for you.
Take it away. I mean, just for context, Frank Shamrock's full-out MMA debut was with John Lober, and John Lober beat the piss out of him until Frank got what fighting was about. But Lober was mean. Go ahead. I'll take it away.
So I met John, I think through Todd Medina originally. Todd had a cage, and we used to train at his gym a lot too. With early on, like I was in Todd's corner when he fought in the UFC 5. And John wasn't around yet, but he did show up a short time later, already tough. He didn't know a lot, but he was tough. And me and him used to train at the Thunder Center together a lot. And we just show up and train. And he was really strong, abnormally strong. I don't know if you remember when Igor had him in a guillotine, he picked him straight up over his head and threw them both backwards, you know, in extreme fighting, fight Igor Vacancian. But he was really strong, really crazy guy. After his Frank Shamrock fight, I showed up to his house. He answers the door with blood all over his shirt right here, and a bong in one hand and a beer in the other hand. And I was like, and I looked at his shirt, and I'm trying to figure out why there's blood. He took a razor blade and sliced. He had massive cauliflower from the fight. He sliced it open and stuck a straw inside it and taped it and just let it drip out onto his shirt while he stood there and was like hanging out watching TV with blood dripping out of his ear onto his shirt, just left it open. And I'm looking at him like, what is wrong with you, dude? But he was so crazy, man. He would show up to jiu-jitsu tournaments at like 6 a.m. and be like, I stayed up all night just so I wasn't late. You know, he'd just party all night the night before jiu-jitsu match. He was a wild one, but he was a good dude, fun guy.
So let's rewind a little bit. You're training in Brazil with Alliance, Jacare Cavalcante. Who were some of the other people in the gym? I think Fabio Gurghel, obviously the general, was there.
Fabio put me to sleep my very first role in Brazil. He was my first role. Slept me with some collar choke and then told me welcome to Brazil.
Did you try and tap and he just like nope, or did you not even tap?
I don't remember. It was fast, but he was there. Roberto Travin, Alexandre Paiva, Leo Vieira was a brown belt. Comprito was a purple belt. Ricardo Vieira was a yellow belt.
Murderer.
So many good guys were there at that time, and all every night they were in class. Like every night that was a class, and it was awesome. Like Marcelo hadn't even started training yet. Fabio hadn't moved to Sao Paulo. It was just loaded with really good guys, and they were friends. Like the first day I got to Brazil, we got hit by a bus in a small little car and got smashed into a wall. The guys jumped out of the car, ran forward to the bus, beat the shit out of the bus driver before the cop got there, and I'm sitting in the car like just mind blown of what went on. That night we're at a bar.
More suited to your style, though.
Oh, 100%. That night we're at a bar and a fight breaks out. Everyone pushes everyone back and lets these two dudes fight on the floor. And a purple belt actually ended up rear naked choking a black belt. But they fought and no one jumped in. They all just held everyone back, watched the fight break up, and then stood up and went back to partying. And I was just like tripping. I was like, dude, this is so crazy. I saw people get shot, live in person down there. They have zero, or at the time they had zero like value for life. Didn't give a shit about anything.
Well, when you were there, I think we'd be remiss to mention February 3rd and 4th in 1996, the IBJJF Worlds took place in Rio. Did you go to that?
I competed.
So you competed in it. I couldn't find anything on it.
Yeah, I competed as a blue belt. I fought Leo Leite. He was a judo black belt who actually he fights in LFA now or Bellator. Big guy now. He's like 220, but he was in my weight class at the time. And he judo threw me and for 2 and then couldn't pass my guard. He won 2-0. That was my only match. Single eliminations all the way back then.
Wow.
Did you witness the Macaco high-end Gracie incident?
Yes. So
please take your time with this one.
Yeah. So before I got to Brazil, the fight with Tico and Hyan happened in the backyard of Carlos Jr.'s house. And they fought on the patio, down the steps onto the grass. And Ryan bit a chunk out of that Tico guy's ear. And I have a VHS of that. So I knew that happened. I saw it on video in America before I even went to Brazil. So now I'm in Brazil. I'm at Worlds, and for whatever reason, I wasn't far from where this started. And I see it start. I start to kind of move towards it. A cop flies past me, and his gun falls out of his holster and hits the ground. I stand on it because there's people fighting all over the place. I stand on it so that no one would get to the gun or see the gun. And I'm just standing on it. Ryan is on the ground with Macaco. As he comes up, I'm as far as I am from my phone right now with my camera, and he's going like this, and there's blood all over the side of his face from Macaco bit Ryan's ear, basically payback. And I was like, and I have like a perfect picture of him just like this, coming up like with blood all over his hands and ear from that fight. That all gets broken up, and the cop comes back, and he's walking around looking for his gun, and I was like, and I pointed, it's like under my foot. And I lifted my foot up, and he's like, and he thanked me and grabbed the gun, took it, and went on his merry way. And I was just like, Jesus, man, like how crazy is that? Nobody got in trouble. Fight got separated, and that was it.
Yeah, high-end Gracie.
That's an epic picture.
Was there? Yeah, for sure. Was there a lot of stories about high-end, like kind of floating around Brazil?
Oh yeah.
Could you give us just one?
So I love Renzo. I mean, that was one of them right there. I love Renzo. Me and Renzo have been friends since I was in Brazil. I met him when I was there, and we've been friends ever since. And I know that, he was very close and loved Ryan a lot. So
His
I'll
brother.
say is he was a wild. You know, he was wild. He got in a lot of fights. He partied a lot. You know, a lot of people were scared of him, and because of how he was. And it kind of reminds me of my growing up in Huntington Beach and how Tank Abbott was. You know, he was the scariest dude in my entire area, and everybody was scared of him. And the cops couldn't wait for him to flinch so they could shoot him. Like that. That's how bad he was.
Like
And
you know who Ryan reminded me of, Mike, is Randleman. Like when Randleman wanted to be crazy and unpredictable and you just didn't know where he was coming from. Like Randleman was one of those dudes too. Like, I mean, just I think you got to be that type A to be there, you know. But Randleman was a guy who, you know, it's like, why don't I kill you? Like he would ask you something like that. It's like, I control yourself, bro.
Good question.
Good question.
So in February 10th, 1996, Circuito de Lutas, you fought a gentleman known as Delcio in Brazil.
Yeah.
Give us a little background on that.
So I was getting ready to leave. I actually believe I flew home the day after that. I had been saying I wanted to go home and fight. And I've been doing privates and jiu-jitsu every day. You know, I've been boxing a little bit with some of the guys, hitting mitts. And one of the guys who promoted that, his name's Tota, he was in the gym, and Jacare said, "Hey, you want to fight?" And I said, "Yeah." And they said, "Well, we're gonna have a fight in X amount of days." It was a couple weeks away. And I said, "Yeah, for sure." And he goes, "Okay, it's gonna be these jiu-jitsu guys versus these karate kickboxing guys from the north." And I said, "Okay." So it's me, a guy Zahusa, Muzio DeAngelis, and Saulo. And
Saulo Ribeiro made his MMA debut that night.
Yeah, he I think he only fought twice, right? Then and one other time. Yeah, and so at that time, there'd still been no jiu-jitsu fights and MMA losses. All right. And I'm there in my corner, in my locker room is Jacare, all the guys from Alliance, but Hoyler, Alio, like everyone was back there because Saulo was fighting also. So when I'm fighting in front of sitting front row. I'm fighting representing jiu-jitsu in Brazil against another guy. And I'm just like, woo, the pressure's on, right? Like, I don't want to be the first guy that loses for jiu-jitsu. And I walked out and Henzo was the ref. How that played out, I don't know. But Henzo was the ref.
That's a good help.
And yeah. And it was fast, man. He for whatever reason, I threw a 1-2 and he shot on me. And I thought it was going the other way for sure. And I guillotined him and jumped guard and choked him in 30 seconds or less. I don't know what the time was on, but it was fast. And it was over. And I was just like, holy smokes. But the lead up to that, so as soon as they asked me to fight, the very next day we're walking down the boardwalk, and on every single pole on the boardwalk, there were posters with my name on it against this guy. And it had the four of us lined up with our names on it. And everyone like walking down the street would like nudge me, be like, no turning back now, no turning back now. And I was just like, oh my God, man, like what the heck? But it all worked out. But it was definitely nerve-wracking fighting there, representing them. But it was also cool to be able to do.
Now that was in a boxing ring, I'm assuming?
Yeah.
Okay, was it with the red mat? I couldn't find the video, but I found some videos around that time.
I don't believe there was a red mat. I only have 2 pictures of the fight. I've got a picture of me on the ground guillotining with Henzo standing over me, and then one on the feet. But I'll have to find the picture to see what color the mat was. I don't remember.
Okay. I was trying to find it. Okay. So you moved back to the States, and you said you go back to the Gracie gym. Okay.
That's when Laimon showed up.
Okay. How long were you there before that relationship ends?
Not long, less than a year. I got there, me and Laimon, maybe. I don't know. So I went back. You can look on my record, I guess. I went back in the beginning of '96 after my fight. So maybe we're February, end of February '96, and I trained until my Militich fight.
Okay, so that's August 30th, 1997.
Okay, so probably 5 or 6 months before that, I had left. maybe 5 months before that I had left. So I was there for a year and a little bit.
Well, they had to have known that you fought in Brazil.
They did.
Okay.
And then me and Laimon, that's when me and Laimon moved in together. And Laimon was there as long as I was at that point. And then a thing was posted on the underground or something that me and Milicic were fighting an extreme challenge. And
Extreme Challenge 9.
Yeah. Horian called me to his office and said, "Hey, what is this?" And I said, "I'm fighting a guy, on this date." And he said, "Yeah, we can't have you do that." And I was like, "What do you mean?" He goes, then he's all panicking. "Do they know you train here?" And I was like, "Probably. I mean, everyone knows where I train. Are they advertising you as a Gracie jiu-jitsu fighter?" And I was like, "No, I don't think so. They are advertising as a jiu-jitsu guy." And he said, "You can't fight." And I said, "I'm fighting." And he said, "Well, give me your contract. Let me see the contract." And I was like, this is 1998. I was like, "I don't think there is a contract."
Yeah. Here, let me say it to you.
The handshake.
You record this.
He asked if there was a poster, or he said he heard there was a poster. I said yes. He wanted to see the poster, so I showed it to him. So he saw that there was no name of the Gracie on there, and whatever. And he told me that I couldn't fight. So I left the office without saying anything yet that I was leaving. And I went downstairs, and me and Marc had already been discussing leaving, just because it was very cultish, and whatnot. And then me and Marc started talking, and then Lowell came in, and then Ethan Milius came in, and it just kind of 5 or 6 of us were talking, and they were all down to leave. We didn't even know what we were going to do yet. Then this rich guy, Avi, this Jewish guy, comes in the room, and he's a blue belt, just a new guy at the Gracie Academy. He says, "Hey," he goes, "I'm rich." He goes, "I'll open a gym right now." And I was like, "What?" He goes, "I own beeper companies all over the place." He goes, "I'll open a gym right now. Let's go." And we're like, "Are you serious?" So me, Marc, Ethan, Lowell, I can't remember this kid, Ryan Parker, but Ryan went back, and this Avi guy leave and start looking for a building, and he ends up buying or opening Beverly Hills Jiu-Jitsu, and we all opened Beverly Hills Jiu-Jitsu together. And Avi was the guy that put up all the money. And then from the rest of that was history. Right after that, me and Pat fought, and John Perretti came in and talked to me, and we fought one more time, and then Perretti hit me up again, and I was in the UFC 16 lightweight, tournament, and fought him again. But from the point I left on, I was busy. I stayed busy fighting and training. When I was leaving, I think I told you this before, when I was leaving, I'm downstairs kind of gathering my stuff together, and this guy, Sam Rand, who managed the Gracie Academy, he says, he goes, "What are you going to do? Where are you going to go?" I said, "I don't know." I said, my ultimate goal is I'm going to open my own gym. I said, "But I'm going to fight. That's my goal. I want to be a fighter. And if I can't do that here, there's no point in me being here." And
it's true.
He goes, "You're going to open your own gym? What?" He goes, "Chris Brennan Jiu-Jitsu? Fuck me. Who's going to train there?" And I was like, "Well, that's my goal. That's my plan. And you just motivated me to make sure that it succeeds." And here we are 25, 6 years later, succeeding. So I left and started training with those guys. They started bringing in, I was still pretty
I can't wait.
loyal.
Chris, I don't mean to interrupt, but that statement right there tells you exactly what that guy has always thought of you.
Oh, yeah, 100%. 100%. I didn't leave disappointed. I didn't leave disappointed. I left motivated and excited, and that kind of was the day moving forward. I was young, but that was kind of the day moving forward that I knew the type of person I was. I didn't go to school. I wasn't educated, but I was self-motivated, and I went to 100% towards everything I ever wanted to do. And when I left there that day, I've been busting my ass ever since then. And that was, me and Marc. I owed Marc money because I didn't have a job, and Marc's parents were sending him money, and Marc paid half of my rent a couple times. I owed him money. That's why you watch that match with me and him. He was a dick to me when the match was over at Grappler's Quest, because me and him had a little bit of bad blood. We're cool now, and I paid him, but it took me a while to pay him. I was broke, and I owed him, I don't know, like $1,500.
Well, here, let's frame this properly. So at Grappler's Quest, Marc Laimon goes on one of the greatest runs, in my opinion, in like the history of a competition jiu-jitsu. It's definitely one of the top 10 runs. He beats Chris Brennan. I think he submitted you.
Yeah.
Then he submits Jeff Monson. And then I think he decision Dean Lister.
Yeah.
All in one day.
All in one day. All within an hour.
That's nuts.
That tournament will lead up to the fight you're talking about in St. Louis.
Okay.
That was
so Marc pulled his hand away. The reason why, for shaking hands is you owed him a couple of months, right? Yeah, I get it. I mean, you guys are young and
I wasn't I kind of laughed it off and left. I was never a dick to him about it. I knew I owed it to him. I wasn't
that's it.
I understood. I was worried. If you watch, I tapped early because I was worried that he was going to break something, and I was more concerned with my MMA career. And what's his name? That Brian Simmons, who owns Grappler's Quest. I took my MMA fight after I accepted to compete in that tournament, and he asked me if I was going to do it. I said, "Yeah, I promise you, I'd be there. I'll be there." And to this day, he thanks me for showing up that day and competing. But I had flown overnight to get to LA to get in my car to drive to Vegas to walk on the mat 10 minutes later and compete against Marc, who, by the way, I lived with him. I trained them every day and probably submitted him 100 times and never got submitted by him once until that day.
You're kidding me.
No, never.
He was up for the fight. Wow.
Hey, I got a question from one of my fans, a guy named Fred Hammer. He said that you and Marc also had a little bit of a rivalry. I don't know if you had an inter school, did he bring a Cobra Kai team over for like an inter gym match or something like that? He was real loud, and I think Gerald Streben fought Rich Crunkleton that day in a match. Any recollection of that day?
Yeah, to be honest with you, I remember Marc's guys there. I forget that Marc was there, if he was there. And my guys beat him. Russ Mira, my Russ Mira, who competed in ADCC against Glover the same day I did. He was a stud, man. And he ran through Simgo and all those guys that were Laimon's guys and through Eddie's guys. And that's where that tournament was great. I had my Westside submission tournament, always had such great competitors show up for it. And I guess Marc must have been there. But that would have been after I had taken care of what I owed him.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it would have been after that for sure. To be honest, it got paid during I believe was a hook and shoot in Vegas when the girl fell on the escalator that was supposed to fight Erica and didn't fight.
Okay.
He was paid then, and that was before that also.
That's cool. Yeah, the thing is, Chris, listen, man, you're extending your credit to hone your craft. It is what it is. You took care of it. You're even. You're not dodging it. Who cares?
I don't burn people. I was in a bad spot. He hooked me up. If he was still mad about it, I get it. It was my fault, but I took care of it.
That's good. That's all that matters. So on August 30th, 1997, go ahead.
That tournament was a great tournament. Marc did have guys there. Eddie had guys there. Gerald had left my gym to move to LA to train with Eddie, and I had already known a good amount of what the rubber guard stuff was, and his guys were trying to hit stuff on Russ, and I would say, get your hands off the mat. All you need to do is keep your hands off the mat, keep your knee up in the middle. And I said that like 10 times, and Eddie was sitting along the mat from me this way, and he goes like this. And looked back to the mat. He was like, damn it, you know the kryptonite. And it worked, right? He beat Scott Epstein, like all his good guys then. Russ and one of my other guys beat them, and it was good though. We had such great competitors at my tournament. Genki Sudo, Javier Vasquez, like a lot of great guys competed in it.
Yeah, Brian Garrity was saying, I went to a tournament and Genki Sudo's there. So
yeah,
that's amazing. So August 30th, 1997, Extreme Challenge 9. We addressed a little bit earlier. You fight Pat Miletich, and the pre-fight, I remember you had been requesting this bout for several months, or several times, I should say, and you end up going to Pat's hometown and doing it there.
Yeah. So me and when Extreme Challenge or Extreme Fighting Battlecade, I think number 4 was the last one they had, or number 3, when Pat lost to Matt Hume.
Yep.
I was supposed to fight Pat on the next one, and then it folded and didn't happen. So I found out that Pat's manager had fights, which was
Monty
mine.
Cox.
And
Yes.
I hit up Monty Cox and said, "Hey, let's do it here." And he said, "Oh, you still want to fight him?" I was like, "Yeah." And he thought it was crazy because I think I had 4 fights and Pat had like 20 or
20
24
something.
fights. Yeah, 24. And I was a blue belt in jiu-jitsu with very limited striking, and I had no wrestling. But I wanted to fight this guy who was like number 4 in the world at the time. And I was like, let's do it. I'm down. So I trained him.
Short time later, he's a world champion. Let's also point that out. I mean, he might have been 4 then, but he's probably number 1
for that entire fight. And I showed up, man, and I'm at Hooters. And I don't know if you guys remember Royce Alger, but he walks behind me and smacks me on the back and he says, "Hang on there, sissy boy." And I looked like that. And I was like, who the hell is this guy? And from the rest of the time I was there and the next time I fought him, every person that would see me be like, "Hang on there, sissy boy." And they all just kept saying that to me. And we fought to a 20-minute draw that night. And I realized, this guy's really good. And had there been a judge's decision, he would have beat me that night. But the next time we fought to an actual draw, the next time we fought to a split decision that I lost, I should have won. Clearly should have won. And I won. And I fought him in a bar that he bounced at, that Mark, whatever his best man's name was the referee. Like, it was crazy. And we fought in a bar where people blowing smoke in my face while I was walking out. But it was cool. It was a good experience to get that guy under my belt, early on. It was a learning. He was very, very tough. Probably not my toughest or hardest guy, but he was the hardest to beat.
Man, you gotta love the old school fights where you fight somebody and you find out, like, who are we talking to? Jazz Thompson, where he fought one of his losses. I think the guy he fought put on the event, his brother was a referee, and the mom and dad
family was the judges.
Like, and he knocks the guy down like 3 times and he loses, and it says like, well, and that's on his record. I'm like, that, how these on our record still? It's crazy.
Well,
yeah, like Noe Hernandez, he fought in the UFC, I think, against Chuck Liddell. He was one of the judges, and then there were 2 guys that were from right there. And Noe gave it to me, the only fighter that was a judge, gave it to me, and the other 2 guys gave it to Pat. But,
well, let's talk about your first fight.
Yeah.
In essence, I mean, Pat's got Mark Hansen, Jeremy Horn in his corner. You come out in a Gracie train, and Chris, they have
who was in my corner? My dad, who never trained a day in his life, my little brother, who never trained a day in his life, and my manager. That's it.
How old was your little brother at that time?
14.
Yeah, I'm about to say, I almost said it's got to be Chris's kid, but I knew it wasn't. Yeah,
14 or 15. He was young.
So Chris Brennan is wearing lineman football pad gloves with tape around them.
Who?
So those were the gloves. Those were not MMA gloves. Those, I think, were like Rydell hand pads for football.
But those were given to us. Pat was wearing them too. Just he was wearing red, I was wearing white. That was the craziest glove ever. There should not have been a glove. When I made a fist, the glove stopped out inside my knuckles. It went like this, and then there was one piece of elastic that wrapped here, and one piece that wrapped here. But it was the thinnest piece of. If you went like this, you were bare knuckle. You weren't even hitting the pad. It was crazy.
Nice.
I don't know why we wore gloves.
Yeah, they were lineman pads. They were 100% football pads.
Yeah.
All right, so you go from there. You walk out in a Gracie train, and dude, the ring itself is like a makeshift. It's a boxing ring where Monty. What's that?
Cage up.
It was a square cage I got put in the corner.
Yeah. He puts like a makeshift cage around a boxing ring. It's wild, man. So on your second one,
in Extreme Challenge 22, same cage.
We hadn't upgraded yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, he hadn't upgraded yet, and it's a few months later. I'm surprised you took a rematch so quick.
Oh, I wanted to fight him so bad. I asked for it again, and got that fight 2 months later, and that's when I lost the split decision to him. It was 1 30-minute round. We fought for a half an hour straight, one round.
Oh, bro.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, there wasn't. I think Pat is 17-1 on your rematch, and his only loss is to Matt Hume, like, which
Yeah.
is nuts. You know, that in
And my only
itself.
loss is to Pat.
Right.
I was
You go for
4
there,
and
you make
Pat.
your UFC debut. Shortly thereafter, March 13th, 1998, you had said you had met up with John Perretti, and you're the alternate bout on a 4-man tournament.
Yeah.
So you fight Courtney Turner.
Yeah, Courtney was supposed to be a lucha libre guy from Brazil, but it was actually out of Louisiana, and he was
A little different.
6'3". What's that?
That's a little different.
Yeah, he was 6'3" in the 170 division, real long, real lanky, and kind of was talking shit at the UFC press conference and the weigh-ins and stuff, and I beat him in probably a minute 20 or something, minute and a half, and
This is
John
420, but yeah, the record's
420?
it might be
Yeah, it's
wrong.
definitely-
I couldn't
it's
find any
definitely
video on it. I couldn't find anything.
Yeah, I had a copy that got stolen from my gym. The UFC has it somewhere, but it's not on Fight Pass for some reason. It was a good fight for me. I got a takedown. He rolled. I went to a heel hook, missed the heel hook, came up to a guillotine. As his head came out of the guillotine, I armbarred him. And he punched me once while I was armbarring him. That was it. And it happened. It was so fast, man. And then Perretti comes backstage and goes, "A lot tougher than you thought, huh?" And I was like, "Bro, it was less than 2 minutes. Like, how tough?"
No.
You know? Like, yeah.
But yeah, sure. Does that make you feel
Yeah.
better?
So in a 4-man tournament, you assume you're not coming in, right? You assume you're not going to fight.
And you're the
So-
alternate. Yes.
Yeah. So I got my fight out of the way. I'm up in the stands, eating a hot dog, chilling, watching Mikey Burnett and Eugenia Tadao murder each other, but more Mikey murder him. And as it's going on and on and on and on, I'm like, man, he might not continue even if he wins. And so I put my stuff down and my food down, and I start going back downstairs. Well, as I go into the tunnel in the back to go back to the locker room, Peretti's running down the hall. "Brennan, start warming up." And I was like, "Oh shit. All right, I'm in." And then as I'm warming up, I'm like, "God damn it, it's Milicic again, man." At that point, I was bummed that it was Pat, because I would have much rather fought any of the other guys in the tournament and got somebody new, you know, but it was me and Pat again, and that's how it worked out.
Well, go ahead, Big O.
I was at that show. Do you remember Milicic suffering through the weigh-ins? Why don't you tell your perspective on that?
Yeah, I was excited for that because the first 2 times we fought walking in at 185. That was just our walking weight, and there was no weight cut. There was nothing, and we fought that weight. I took the tournament at 170 and was like, all right, you know. So I didn't wrestle. I was walking and training at 170 for a month before that fight. I got to the weight and hung out there and didn't realize it, didn't know better. I showed up to the UFC to the weigh-in, and he was dying, man. They were carrying him to the scale. And I'm like, oh man, we've been dead even strength wise. I said, I'm gonna beat the shit out of him this time. The next night I came back, I was still 170. He was about 185, 188, somewhere in that, you know, close to 190. And I was still 170 pounds, and that for the first time. And you know, we went 20 minutes and we went 30 minutes, and he didn't seem much stronger than me. He was a better wrestler. He didn't seem much stronger. Well, that night, you know, he was much stronger, way stronger than me. And I was like, holy smokes, you know. From that point on, I kind of mastered the whole weight cut thing. But that was the first time in my life that I was like, oh, that makes a huge difference. When he got in the cage, I looked at him, I was like, man, he was way better than he did yesterday.
Yeah. Well, you know, at that point though, Pat's first round person was Townsend Saunders,
Yeah.
who's an Olympic silver medalist, and Pat ekes out a split decision. That kind of had to make you feel good too, because you knew he already had a hard 15 minutes in him.
It did, but at the same time, Townsend didn't throw a lot of punches. Pat didn't get beat up, so it was more of a grappling match. It was kind of a real good warm up for him. And mine had been maybe 2.5 hours. You know, it had been a long time, and so I was like starting all over again with hot dogs in my system. And I to be honest, I'd prefer to go the route he went. Plus, if you're in really good shape, which I assume he was, it's not going to affect you, you know, too bad if you get out of it without getting beat up at all.
So Igor Zinoviev and Frank Shamrock were the main event that night.
Yeah.
Did it shock you when you found out Zinoviev was Jeffrey Epstein's bodyguard?
I didn't find out till right now.
Oh, okay.
Was he really?
Yeah.
Wow. What did he guard him from?
He was his Miami.
I'm sure, you know, his fans.
He was his Miami bodyguard, yeah, and the driver, supposedly.
Wow. That's
He
crazy.
saw nothing.
But let me ask you about your Perretti
nothing.
experience, because you had that was John Perretti, one of his first UFCs, and you had like Townsend Saunders is his signature, you know, bringing in Olympic wrestlers and that sort of stuff. How were your dealings with him? Was it something where, did you feel he tried to shit on everybody? Did you feel like he tried to shit on you?
So he's obviously a different kind of guy. He's very awkward. He was nice to me, but he was also, you're here and he's here, and he's going to make sure you know that. And I had one great experience with him later on in a fight in Colorado. But, you know, he was, I lost in that tournament to Pat in the finals, and I got cut. You know, I never got brought back until later on during the Zuffa years. So it sucked because I won a fight, and then I lost the fight in the same night and didn't get brought back to the UFC. So that was a bummer. And another time I was at the UFC, I was with I cornered Jeremy Horn the night he fought Chuck Liddell, the night he beat Chuck Liddell. And because at that point, me and Pat had become friends. You know, me and Monty were tight. Monty hooked me up with some fights and stuff here and there. So I was cornering Jeremy when he choked him. And that night, or the night before that, me and Jeremy were in the octagon just kind of playing with some stuff. And Perretti walks in. He goes, "Hey, what's up, blah, blah." And we're on the ground doing something. He goes, show me where you put your legs on the heel hook. So I put my legs in, and he goes and pops my knee by pulling on the inside of my heel. And I was like, oh, literally the next day I'm on crutches, and he's making fun of me. I'm like, bro, like, why didn't you like pull slow? What was that all about? I was just showing you, don't put your foot there. And I was like, well, okay, thanks. You know, so he was kind of a dick. Yeah, he was kind of a dick at that point.
In the face. Don't leave your face there.
Shocked, right? And so that night, hey,
yeah, especially when they ask you to like give you the leg.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
not like they earned it. You know, they're asking for it.
Yeah, I wasn't even worried. I'm in jeans and a sweatshirt. It wasn't like I was rolling. I was in jeans and a sweatshirt showing Jeremy something, and John asked me to show me where I put my foot on the heel hook. So I showed him, and he just yanked the inside of my heel and inside heel hooked me. And I was like, what the heck? That night when Chuck fought Jeremy Horn, is that the same night Tito fought Ken? It is, right?
I don't have it in front of me.
Oh no, I'm
That
sorry.
was- I think
Tito
that was-
fought Guy.
Yeah, Tito fought. I was gonna say Tito fought Guy, and Ken was in Guy's corner, so there was that big rigmarole.
Was that
I
that
have
night?
a
Are
huge
you sure?
story about that too.
I thought that was
UFC
in
20?
Mississippi, but are you sure?
Yeah, it should have been in Mississippi, UFC 20.
It's some old school stuff right here, bro.
I was at that where Chuck got beat by Horn, but I remember that final match being there, but I don't know, maybe it was.
I got my nickname that night.
Really?
Great story.
Go ahead.
We'll listen to it in a second.
Go ahead. I'm doing a little research. Take it away.
So I believe it was that night, like Maurice Smith or someone fought Kevin Randleman that night too.
Push
All
through.
right, he fought.
Keep going.
Horn fought Liddell at UFC 19 in Bay
Mississippi?
St. Louis, Mississippi.
Yep.
Tito and Guy was the main event.
Okay.
Gary Goodrich fought Andre Roberts, etc. Kevin Randleman was there, fought Maurice Smith.
Okay. Yeah. So I was there that night, and I ended up cornering Tito too. So cornering Tito, I am the whole ordeal starts with Tito and Ken Shamrock. Tito turns around, you know, calls him a bitch and all this stuff. And that carried on. We end up, me, Jeremy Horn, Tito, a kid that I brought with me that didn't fight, and whoever Tito brought with him, who also I believe didn't fight. He didn't have any of his normal guys with him. We were locked in a room the size of my office for a couple hours because all of the Lions Den guys and the Hammer House guys were outside the door wanting to kick Tito's ass. This went on for a while till the event was over. We got escorted from the hotel or from the.
What started it?
Tito did in the cage. He started talking shit to Ken.
Yeah, what happened? Let me
I
give
think
a little
Guy,
background.
did he wear a
When he
t-shirt
got
that said,
done with Guy, he
Yeah,
put on
yeah,
his t-shirt
Gay
said,
Ma- Gay Metzger is my
Metzger is
bitch."
my bitch.
okay.
The main thing to remember here is that Tito made his MMA debut in a 4-man tournament, beat a guy named Wes Albritton, and then
And
lost
lost
to
to
Guy Metzger in the final.
He was beating the brakes off him and got caught in a choke.
He got caught in a choke, and it was also one of those kind of weird. It was a weird situation. There was a lot of questions there, and Tito was very not hurt. So this rematch was a long time in the making. And as Chris will probably back up, both Chris's, the Lions Den guys were privileged guys there. So Metzger gave him a lot of attitude, like, I already beat you. What do I need you? You know, Tito was coming up. So this was a very big grudge match. And the Gay Metzger is my bitch is the shirt. That's what set Ken off. Because, and
So
Ken
where does
followed
Hammer
the top
House?
of the fence.
Yeah, how'd Hammer House get involved?
I have no idea. Friends with Ken or something. I don't know. There was a bunch of those guys outside the door. And I got in UFC at UFC 16. This is only 19, right? So I'm still trying to get my way back to the UFC. And Ken comes over the top of the fence. Tito goes at him. John, I think it's John McCarthy, picks him up and turns him around and sends him away. Anyway, we're in that room for too long. I don't know how long, until we got escorted by cops back to the hotel. When we get back to the hotel, they're all the Lions Den guys are still waiting outside. And I'm looking out the window of the bus, and I go, if this starts, I said, it's me and Mikey Burnett. I said, he's the only guy my size. I'm going for Mikey first. And my buddy Jeremy goes, oh man, he goes, the East Side Assassin versus the West Side Strangler. And I was like, oh, that's a good name. And because I always choked everybody. And that's a good name. And it just stuck. And it ended up not happening. The cops got off the bus. Everyone got separated. Tito ran upstairs and grabbed his bags, came downstairs, got back on the bus, and went on tour with Korn. And left everyone to eat shit after he started it all.
Yeah, I remember that. He actually, to be honest, he went to a porn convention and then hooked up with Korn to do their tour. That's what he did.
Okay.
A good
Wild.
night.
Wild stuff.
I was at that show. I was at that one.
Which, the porn convention or the MMA event?
Korn. He went to Korn.
I was at the fight show.
Oh, okay. All right, just curious. So you hooked in with Monty
Bruce
Cox.
Buffer may have gotten into a car accident that day too.
Tito did?
Who's it?
Bruce Buffer got into a car accident that day. He was seen taking out cash at a cash machine in the casino lobby to pay his way out of some problems there.
So who's managing you at this point?
Me?
Yeah. It's yourself?
Nobody. Yeah, I had
Okay.
a buddy, Roger, who helped me out a little bit. Then my brother helped me a lot. I never had a manager.
Okay. That's probably a smart move. So you hook in with Monty Cox. He gets you a main event against Steve Horton, who's a high-end wrestler that refuses to learn any jiu-jitsu whatsoever. I have to assume this is a last-minute replacement.
So the night before, Monty calls me and says, hey, Pat's sick. He was supposed to fight Pat. Pat's sick. You want to replace him and fight this guy in Salt Lake City tomorrow? And I was like, what? And I said, do I have to weigh in? He goes, nah. He goes, I'll just fly you there and get you there. I'll buy you 2 tickets and get you there. So I was like, all right. I saw Joe Stevenson rock this guy in an event in Colorado that shortly before that. And I was like, yeah, I'll fight him. I'll go. So we land. By the time we land, the fights had already started. By the time I walked into the arena, they're on fight 8, and I'm on fight 16. I'm fight 16. So I get in there, and I walked in because I didn't. Dude, there was a guy I don't even think there was a guy to pick me up because we were talking to the guy driving us about the fights, telling him that there were fights. So I think I took a cab. And we got into the regular level of the arena, and I came in at the top of the arena and had to walk down the stairs and jump the fence at the bottom just to get into the actual venue or the actual floor of the fight. During that time, 2 fights broke out in the crowd. There was 16 fights in the crowd that night. Tank Abbott pissed on the floor on the people below him, and he got kicked out. So I go back and I start warming up.
He was like on a balcony?
No, he was on like row 2, and he pissed on row 3.
Wow.
It was nuts. The fights were so bad, like Pat Smith got in the cage and he's leaning on the cage watching fights in the crowd before his fight started. And finally the ref just started their fight so the fight in the crowd would stop. It was nuts. Anyway, I go warm up. I come out, I fight this guy, and he shoots on me, or he comes out swinging. I actually took him down, and I'm like, hey, my wrestling's paying off because this guy's a pretty good wrestler. And he was a solid wrestler.
Yeah, very good
I circle behind him and start blasting him in the back of the head. And the ref's like, no punches in the back of the head. So I circle back to shoot sprawl position, and I'm elbowing down on his back. He goes, there's no elbows. I said, bro, I just got here. I missed the rules meeting. This is during the fight. I said, I missed the rules meeting. and he goes, well, there's no punches to the back of the head. There's no elbows to the back. So I was like, okay.
Got it.
So I punch him a few more times. I let him start to come up. I grab his neck and guillotine him, put him to sleep. And I was the last fight of the night. Kleber Luciano fought Fabiano Iha. There was wild fights that night.
Man.
That was when Travis
Anyway.
Fulton slammed that karate guy.
Oh my
to death.
God, I thought he killed that guy. I didn't see that fight. I saw a video of it later. I wasn't there for it, but that was wild. Pat Smith fought a guy named David Dodd. And apparently
So David Dodd, just so we know, Jeff Monson's MMA debut was against David Dodd, and David Dodd armbars him. He's like a 3-6, 3-7 guy. He had the greatest moment of his life that night. That's who David Dodd is. Go ahead.
Well, apparently he was saying a bunch of racial stuff to Pat during the fight. So I'm later coming in to the locker room, counting my cash from the fight, and my head's down, and I look up, and there are 2 sides facing off against each other of 10 or 12 guys on 10 or 12 guys. And I walked right through the middle of them, and I looked up, and I saw Tracy Hess and John De La O were on one side. They were with me. So I slid over to their side, and I was like, what's up? And a fight was about to break out in the locker room, and then the cops came in the locker room and stopped that. I don't even know how it didn't happen, but it would have been ugly because everyone in the room fought. So it would have just been, would have been rough. But yeah, that was a crazy event. I don't think Salt Lake City ever had another fight again.
That's enough. Huh?
Yeah, it was packed. It was like 8,000 people there. It was packed.
I'll be back in a few minutes. Go ahead.
He's got to grab his charger. Okay. Well, from there, this is where things kind of get interesting. And yeah, we're about at the hour and 20-minute mark. Chris, this is what we've kind of agreed to do. We really need to pin down your career because there's so much more. So we're going to probably go every other week at releasing parts of your interview. So your next fight is the Bas Rutten Invitational, June 1st, 1999, the inaugural event against Steve Gamm. Steve Gamm is actually, he's probably a veteran of about 20 fights. He's fought some pretty high-end guys.
Yeah.
Sean Shirk being another one of them.
Yeah. You want to know about that fight?
How do you get involved with the Bas Rutten Invitational? Because John Perretti, I believe, was also the referee.
So John Perretti tells me, you want to get back in the UFC, come here and fight, this guy.
So we're right.
And whatever. So this was an unfortunate situation for me. And this is my good experience with John Perretti. I take this fight. I drove from California to Denver, Colorado, get there the day before the fight. We are on the way to the fight, and a car is next to us, and this chick's face, this is right around the Columbine time, and this chick's face is all pierced up and all whatever, and my wife at the time is driving, and I'm shotgun, and my buddy Tracy Hess is in the back. And I look over, or my wife looks over, and she goes, oh my God, my God, look straight. And the girl looks over and says, what did you say, blah, and starts talking shit. And I'm like, just drive. We're literally just left the hotel, and we're driving to the venue. And as we're driving, this girl pulls up next to us and starts throwing Coke cans, full Cokes at my wife's car. And I was like, hey, knock it off. They threw something else. So naturally, I throw something back at them. And we're in a 3-lane road, big road. and we're in the fast lane. They race up next to us and stop in the middle of the road and block us off and get out of the car. So as they get out of the car, two girls get out. Big girls driving, another girl gets out of the car, and then a dude gets out. Well, I get out of the car and I go to the driver's side to stop this girl from getting to my wife. I'm like, hey, get back in the car, get back in the car. And she shoves me again and just trying to push me basically into traffic. And I kept pushing. I said, hey, don't touch me. Don't touch me. And another girl smacks me from the side. I said, listen, if one of you guys touch me, you're going to knock this dude out, right? And this chick shoves me again, and I go, and knock this guy to his knees and then uppercut him and knock him onto the hood of her car. A girl jumps on my back and starts blasting me in the face. I show up to the fight with a shiner. She starts blasting me in the face, and all of a sudden, I feel her get yanked off of me and fly past me, boom, off the car and hit the ground unconscious. And my buddy Tracy stands up and goes, let's go. I was like, oh my God. He got out of the car and laid her out. So I'm out of a button-up shirt that was on, it's ripped off of me. I showed up to the fight with a shiner and a ripped shirt. And that wasn't even the problem of the fight. The problem was I had never been altitude before, and we're in Denver, Colorado. How long was the fight?
227.
227?
Yeah.
So I ran this guy over for 2 minutes. Okay, ran him over. I had him in every single submission. He didn't touch me, didn't have any submissions set up on me. To be honest, I don't even know if he touched me when the fight ended. I'm going for a heel hook, and literally from my body, from my lower body to up here, turns purple. And I went for a heel hook, and I just laid straight back. I was dead. And John Perretti's reffing, and he puts his foot on my shoulder and kicks me. He goes, let's go, Brennan, and pushes me, gives me a chance. He's like, come on, because this was my chance to get back to the UFC, and a referee shouldn't touch you in the fight, right? But he was giving me every opportunity he could. And I could not sit up to do anything. The guy got on top of me, and I think he might have punched me once or twice, or was going to, and John just stopped the fight.
That altitude's, dude, altitude.
I was ruined. From that point on, every one of my fight camps took place in Big Bear. It was a learning experience.
Man, the UFC, it's hard to imagine. At one point, the UFC did 8 heavyweight fights in Denver.
Yeah, Kahn and Verdum.
Yeah, it's duh. So Boss Rutten. Go ahead, Miguel.
I was going to mention Boss Rutten. You're at the Boss Rutten Invitational. He had ties to the Beverly Hills Jiu-Jitsu Club. What are your boss stories? Or
he was crazy. That gym, going back to Beverly Hills, he was there. Marco Huas was there. Mark Kerr was there. Oleg was there. Pedro Hizzo, when he was in town, was there. Everyone came through that gym. Maurice Smith. I was teaching class, and Maurice Smith got on my motorcycle and rode away in shorts and no shoes on a GSXR 750 street bike. And rode off, and I hadn't even met him yet. But there was a lot of good guys came in and out of that gym. Boss was wild, man. He was a wild man always, ever since I met him through our Pride days and everything.
So he kind of gets roped into putting his name on different things. So
yeah, to be honest, I don't even know if he was at the event. I don't know if I met him at the event or not. He was also still named on the first King of the Cage.
That's where we're at right now. It becomes Boss Rutten's King of the Cage, where October 30th, 1999, where you fight Joe Stevenson.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's actually a big fight.
Yeah. Joe was young. I didn't want that fight, but King of the Cage really tried to set me up, numerous times. And the first one was Joe. They thought Joe was going to beat me. They saw me fight in Casper, Wyoming, or in Denver, Colorado, because Joe fought that night. Joe got knocked out by Jens Pulver with an open hand strike that night. There was a lot of good fighters on that card that night. I forget the heavyweight's name. Big guy used to wear red, white, and blue shorts. Bald. You can look it up.
Ron Waterman.
Yeah, Ron Waterman.
Oh yeah.
And then Jens Pulver, me, the Steve, the guy that I fought later, Steve Horton.
Steve Gom.
I saw Steve Horton fight. And then the Steve Gom guy, I don't think he ever did anything after that. That was just that was a bad night. fighting in altitude, but
It happens.
yeah. Anyway, I get back and Ted.
So what, Ted Williams?
Ted
Yeah.
Williams
He fought
and
that
Terry
too.
hit me up and said, "Hey, you want to fight Joe Stevenson and King of the Cage?" And I was like, "Yeah, I will, sure. I'll fight anybody." And I didn't know yet, but Joe ends up being 17, right? He was 17 years old. He was, a stacked, jacked little monster. And they had seen me in Colorado with my wife and my buddy Tracy. So back to that Colorado fight, I drove there, spent the night, drove back, didn't get paid. It was free unless you won the tournament. It was free. So I fought for no money, drove all the way there and fought. It's free. Anyway, I am now scheduled to fight Joe in King of the Cage, and Ted starts calling my house and he says, "Hey," he goes, "there's no way you beat this kid. What do you think you're going to do to him?" He goes, "I'm 260 pounds. It takes me 10 minutes to submit him." He goes, "He's the next UFC champion. You're never going to submit him." I was like, "Well, we'll see."
Oh, thanks for the motivational phone call. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see. So then
Thanks, buddy.
Joe starts calling my house. Joe starts calling my house and telling me he's going to bang my wife. He says he saw her in Colorado and he's going to bang my wife and all this shit, right? So Terry and Ted are partners.
Like a true 17-year-old, a senior in high school would do. Okay.
Yeah. So I'm training with Marc Laimon at the time, who I met at that extreme challenge that we talked about. And I said, "Man, what do I do? What do I do?" He goes, "Whatever you catch, don't let go." He goes, "Whatever you catch on him, don't let go." And I said, "Okay." So I show up to the fight, after however long of them calling my house, talking trash to me. And
Who gave him your phone number?
probably Terry or Ted. They were the promoters of the event and the coach. And the King of the Cage Octagon was in their gym, in Joe's gym.
Okay.
So, which leads you to watch where he runs me and smashes me into the crossbar of the cage because he knew where it was.
There we go. I talked to Miguel about this. This is fantastic.
So he comes out and I'm already in kill mode, right? I'm gonna fucking hurt this kid. And he comes out and has his hand out like this. And I think he's coming out in like a Gracie stance for some reason. I don't know. I've never seen the kid fight. And I smack his hand out and jab him in the face. Well, everyone booed me because apparently he was coming out to touch gloves with me. But like, if he was coming out to touch gloves, it's only because he was scared of everything he had led up to, everything he'd done leading up to that.
It's like calling your house. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, it probably just said, "Oh, we have to fight." So I smack him, I guillotine him, and he picks me up and turns and runs straight to the gate that has the crossbar in the gate and hits me square in the back.
Okay, wait. Let me just kind of dress this up. So Chris jumps guillotine. The cage door wall has an exposed bar with no padding on it.
Yeah.
And to Joe's credit, man, he thought of it and he did it. He literally just rammed you into the exposed bar. Yes.
He was not getting out of that guillotine. That fight was over. He picked me up and ran straight into that bar. I was like, boom, like that. And I fell and he jumped on top of me. He started swinging. I got an underhook. I came up on top of him. I'm standing in his guard, blasting him in the face. And he basically just does a sit up right into me and comes up on a shot again. Like the punches weren't even phasing him. I'm like, what the heck? And I go for a guillotine again. He does a takedown. And off his takedown, I looked for a knee bar and went right back to the triangle. I locked up the triangle. At that point, I knew there was no way he was getting out. I start squeezing. He starts tapping. I start squeezing harder. Larry Landless sits on my head and he's bouncing on my head, trying to pry my legs apart. And I'm looking the other way, just holding on to the choke as long as I can. If you watch the video, Ted Williams leaves the gate or leaves where he's standing to go to the entrance before the fight's even over because he was going to come after me. Well, Marc Laimon was in my corner and he went the other way to meet him at the gate. And they run into each other and the fight's over. I finally let go. I stand up. As I turn around, my buddy Tracy jumps on me because he had already jumped over the fence to come celebrate with me, but I didn't know who it was because of all the drama. And I was like, ah! And then I hugged him. That ended up being a 15 on 15 out in the parking lot. The security and police and the Indian reservation people had to come.
Who muted him?
Oh,
because of the drama that took place after that. I was like, man, he started all of that. He's 17. I said, it doesn't matter. Like, you guys let him in a cage with a grown ass man, and he's calling my house, telling me all this stuff. You can't claim he's
Yeah,
17.
and you gave him my phone number. Yeah, I mean they kind of deserve a mouth shot too at that point.
Yeah, but you guys can't claim, oh, he's 17 if you're letting him fight men. Like if he's fighting men and talking, that he's a grown up, you know?
Yeah.
And so that was the end of that ordeal. Months later, not even months later, Ted Williams trains Antonio McKee. So they call me, wanted me to fight Antonio next. They're just lining them up, trying to get me beat. As soon as they brought me in, they thought I was going to get beat by him. He was their guy. Then they sent Antonio after me. And I don't know if you want to get into that fight now or later or what.
Oh, dude, Antonio is a savage. He is. I mean, we had interviewed Antonio. I think that's how kind of you and I linked up. That's when you had found out shortly after Antonio planned on murdering you.
Someone said, "Did you see Antonio wanted to murder you?" And I was like, "What?" I was like, "No, we're cool." He goes, No. Back then, I was like, "What?" So I listened to it. And I'm like, "Holy smokes, dude!"
Yeah.
He's a wild one, man. So that's April 15, 2000. It's a co-main event, and Antonio McKee is 10-0, and you're listed at 7-3-1, and you got Marco Huas in your corner again.
I was 7, Pat Miletich and Steve Gum.
Yes, right. 7 of Pat Miletich. Yeah. Right. So you were wearing a shirt that fight.
Yeah.
What was the reason behind it?
So all sorts of things, but I was a mental wreck every time I fought, right? Like I would throw up before my fights. I was nervous before my fights. Marco Huas had just got knee surgery, so he wasn't there. Okay. I wore a Marco Huas t-shirt, but I'm literally, everyone I talked to before the fight that trained with Antonio was like, he's really slippery. He's really slick, like skin-wise. He's very hard to tap. And everyone I talked to, black belt-wise, no one had submitted him.
No, he's a great wrestler. Yeah.
Wow.
Like, how's that? Like I trained with a lot of great wrestlers before. I tap them. They get on top, but I still tap them. And no one had tapped them. So right as I'm walking out, I literally puking in the trash cans or announcing my name. I'm about to walk out, and I had too many yes men around me my whole career. Right, like I was the owner of my gym. I was my own coach. I used all my students as my training partners. It was just, I was trying to raise a family and do all of it at the same time. So it wasn't like I really went away. When I went away, I'd go to Big Bear for 2 weeks and bring all my fighters with me to help me. So I'm about to walk out, and I said, and it's cold, we're outside. And I said, "Hey, what do you think if I would leave my shirt on to absorb his sweat when he's on top of me so I can try and submit him?" Yeah, sure. Yeah, do that. That was all I got from everybody. So I was like, okay. So I left it on. Had I known I was going to have one of the greatest freaking head kick knockouts ever out and pictures, I'd have much rather not had a shirt on.
I thought you had staff or something.
And that shows you how ghetto MMA was back then. I could fight in a t-shirt. It wasn't even a small t-shirt. It was a big t-shirt.
It was.
It wasn't a rash guard. It was a full-out.
No, it was like a size too big. Yeah, it was like a size too big. So Antonio says, "Hey, Brennan beat me, ain't no doubt." And he says, one of the mitigating factors on his end, and it's not your fault, it's his fault, was that in order to warm up, he was having sex in the parking lot prior to your fight, and he had no legs. That's what he said.
That's the second excuse. The first excuse was right after the fight at the hospital, he was bitching that somebody put GHB in his water between the 2 rounds, between round 1 and round 2. He was blaming Thomas Denny. He was blaming Ted. He was blaming anybody he could. At the weigh-ins, I get on the scale, and he walks up and pushes me and knocks me off the scale. And he says, "Let's go winner takes all." And I was like, okay. He said, "But I'm the champ, so most likely I'm getting paid more than you, but yeah, okay." And he goes, "Let's go winner takes all." I was like, okay. He pushes me off the scale. So I get back on the scale, and he looks like Demolition Man. He's got a bleached goatee and hair, and when the fight's done, he was knocked out. He was knocked out bad. I know he said to you guys that he was trying to still fight or tell them he wanted to fight. He wasn't. He was out for a long. Like his jaw was like resting on the ground, and his wife was like trying to climb through the squares in the cage, screaming. And that led my wife to never watch me fight again. Seeing her made my wife at the time never want to watch me again. She'd go to the fight, but she'd leave her head down until the fight was over, and because she felt for her,
Wow.
But, I knocked him out. He left on a stretcher. And then the night wasn't even over yet, and he was telling people that someone put GHB in his water, and that's what happened. But I literally knocked him out 9 seconds into that second round. So even if they did, it didn't work that fast.
That stuff works quick, I guess. Who do you think did it?
I don't know, but anyway, it didn't happen. But I've got a pretty big heart, and I felt bad, even though he was a dick to me, and he's leaving, and he's on the stretcher, and my team's going, that's what happens when you fuck with Next Generation, blah, blah, and he's not even barely conscious. He's in a neck thing. And I was just like, guys, chill, relax. And I never went, Todd Medina, I think after his fight tried to go get my money at the hospital because Todd fought Vernon, I think that night. But yeah, because it was supposed to be winner takes all, but I never got that.
No, you gotta let that ride.
I didn't get the $50 that King of the Cage was paying.
Yeah.
What was it like working with those guys? Terry Trebilcock.
They were dicks, right? Like Terry was nice to my face, but they try to get me beat all the time, man. I think my next fight was Joe Hurley, and that's when they really exposed themselves. Yeah, they were shady. You'd go to weigh-ins, and I liked Ted, and Terry was all right, but you'd go to weigh-ins, and Ted would have like a 357 Magnum sitting on the desk or on his chair while he was counting the money and counting your tickets. And I'm just like, Jesus, man. But it is what it is. They're all right. They tried to act like they liked me, but based on my opponents and how they treated me leading up to it, they weren't trying to build me up or anything.
So why do you think if you really think of it, and I know your son's in Bellator, and there's no mistaking that he is your child, just looking at his ears. Like if you put a mask over his face, only saw his ears, you're like, oh yeah, that's a Brennan kid. But if you really think about it, King of the Cage, they had video distribution, they had pay-per-view, they were established.
Name recognition.
Bellator shouldn't even exist. Like it should be King of the Cage, but they never pushed themselves. They never moved forward.
The problem was they got to the point where they would have the valet guy fight the cook. And that's no bullshit. They would have the valet guy at the reservation where they fought fight somebody that was a cook at the restaurant that had beef. They put together fights. They were just trying to make money, and they put together fights that were terrible. And they had really good guys fight for King of the Cage. They had some high-level guys for quite a while. They had an affiliation with Pride, and Pride would send guys over and pay the purse of the guys they had fight, like Otsuka. Guy Mesger was fighting in King of the Cage when he was under Pride's contract. They were doing. They had some good guys fight in those events, and they just never went the right direction with it.
I don't think a lot of people realize just how much money the UFC reinvested into the fighters, into the production, the program, and to make that grow. Yeah, the brand, where it looks like King of the Cage, those people might have taken that money and ran with it. And that was the difference. Like UFC didn't need the money, they had some legit investors, so they didn't need they could reinvest that money where these people just took it and had a good time. And I mean, people don't understand how much that money has to be reinvested. I mean, a couple of people can make some money, or they can really reinvest it, and that's what it takes to make it grow. And doesn't sound like they did. I'm sure they did pretty well for a while, but they didn't. They're still where they're at. You know what I mean? They never really progressed like they should have.
Yeah, I mean, they were buying super nice Corvettes, houses in Mexico, taking trips from Mexico. They were doing stuff like that, and not putting it back and dressing the part and looking like rock stars. But they were the only ones that were doing that. No one else was getting anything out of it.
I remember what
for $500 to show, $500 to win. Antonio was maybe $1,200. It was like,
wow.
Yeah, and I was the main event or co-main event all the time.
I've been in constant contact with Crazy Horse Charles Bennett, or Felony Charles Bennett, and eventually he's going to be on here. But the turning point with him was, I want to change my name to Felony, and they had an attorney call him saying, we've invested over $1 million in promoting you and that nickname. And first thing out of his mouth was, well, I'm almost homeless.
Yeah.
Where's my money?
Right. Right.
Yeah. Well, I'm
You
changing
know?
it now. Thanks, Dick. You know.
I don't remember what magazine it was, but in some magazine, and you know, King of the Cage had their hype and stuff. They're just one of those things that for me was a turn on. There's a picture of it's a throne and Terry sitting on the throne with the King of the Cage belt on it.
Yeah.
It's like,
Was the ball guy behind him?
Osborne and I didn't do that low stuff.
Hey, the only throne he should was at the toilet. That's what he should have been sitting.
That's right.
So September 16, 2000, you fight Lions Den mainstay Joe Hurley, who we're going to track down very soon, have him on the program. You lost in the first round to elbows, but you were the King of the Cage champion at this time.
Yeah. So leading up to this fight, Pride contacted me about fighting Sakuraba. And I was a little bit small. So I'm walking, you know, I got up to about 185 pounds. And I tell Terry, I said, hey, you know, I got a fight. I've got this fight coming up. And he knew about it. He says, that's fine. Joe will fight you at that weight. Just walk in at that weight. And Joe wasn't a big 170. I think he went to 55 later. And he says that I can fight him at that weight, you know, and whatever. Well, so I do that. Well, the night before the fight, and I mean night, like 9 o'clock at night, the night before the fight, he calls me and says, hey, Ken said no, you got to make weight. And I'm like, what? I'm 15 pounds over. And he says, yeah, you gotta make weight. And I was like, did you know this? He goes, no, you know, whatever. So the night before the fight, I had to cut weight 15 pounds and make weight the day of the fight. And then, and I told him, I was like, I'm just not going to fight. And well, he was in with Pride. He was with Pride. And he says, well, they're going to take that fight away. Then that fight's not going to happen. And I wanted to fight in Pride. You know, I wanted to get out of there and go fight in Pride. And I wanted to get paid. So I make the cut and weigh in the day of my fight. I'm sucked up in bed. You know, again, that's another fight. I was winning 100. He didn't land one strike on me until the 3 or 4 elbows. And that was again because if you watch me, I just literally fall back dying because I was, you know, I just cut 15 pounds and weighed in the day of. And, you know, you typically can't do that. Even as a wrestler, you want to cut a couple pounds on weigh-in day and then put it back on. But I didn't have that opportunity. So Ken and I had asked Ken and argued with Ken and tried to get him to let me, you know, weigh in or whatever, and told him so Joe didn't have to cut, let him eat. And I would lose like 5 or 6 pounds, you know, and try to meet him in the middle. And they said, no, and made me make weight. And I had to drive down to the Lions Den to weigh in there so that Ken could see me get on the scale. Then I got there and waited an hour and Ken didn't even come. So he let some other guy watch me weigh in and he wasn't even there after saying that he had to see me personally weigh in. So, yeah, that was, so then I went backstage and Yokino Kondo.
Man, you really made a lot of, you really just made you made it real easy for them.
Oh, yeah. I went backstage and Yokino Kondo ripped up my Pride contract right in front of me, literally ripped it right in front of me and said, maybe later. And Shannon fucking Rich replaced me.
I was going to say, Rich, and Shannon Rich got the fight. It was just another slap in the face, really.
Yeah. That's probably the biggest slap in the face.
God, man. What was the contract for with Pride? How much money were you supposed to get? 30K?
10 and 10.
Oh, okay.
No, it was just 10 and 10.
Oh, yeah. It's still decent for the day.
I mean, it was better than what I was getting at King of Cage.
You know, as a West Coast promoter, I always had, you know, a superficial impression that you were their guy, that King of, you know, I guess because you had their belt and stuff, but I guess what you're saying also doesn't surprise me with them. But
I mean, I forced myself to be their guy by winning, you know?
Yeah.
I just kept, I kept winning. After that fight, I came back, beat another guy, and just kind of got the belt back.
And they lied because they told, you know, like I was like, well, my pay scale's around theirs and stuff, but they lie about what they paid you. So it's like, hey, I can't afford that guy. It's shocking.
Yeah, they would come in and be your manager when other people wanted to use you, but then really wouldn't pay you when you fought for them.
Yeah, no, they never paid well.
That's wild. Yeah, wow. And how do they fall on Shannon the Cannon?
Terry, I'm sure he had the connection with them.
He probably paid from his trip to go there or something.
Chris Lytle, you told me a story about Mexico and Shannon the Cannon.
I fought
bare knuckle boxing.
Yeah, he showed up and he brought a belt and he was like, I want to fight for this belt. Is that all right? And they're like, sure. He was the first fight of the night, and it's for some belt that he brought. Because there was no title fights. There was no title fights. The only fight that had a belt involved was the one that he brought. So he fought some terrible guy. He won. He's like, I holding this belt over his head. We're like, you brought the belt. The winner got it. All right, congratulations. It was like, I've never seen that before. Somebody bring the belt that they're fighting for, and
wow.
Yeah, it was very heroic. We were all proud of him.
You slide that in when the promoter's super busy.
Yeah,
and
they were like,
he's doing a million things. I
go
bought
ahead,
my own award.
Congrats,
Hey, Mike.
Yeah.
Can I continue this because I've got to go?
100%.
I
I appreciate your time, dude.
We're gonna go 1 week from now.
I don't know if I told you did I tell you I was sick? I had COVID real bad.
Oh no.
What?
We didn't know that.
So I had
Right
COVID
now?
3 months ago real bad. I was in the hospital for a week and I was on oxygen for 6 weeks,
Jeez.
24 hours a day. I now have high blood pressure. I'm on blood pressure medicine, which is at home and I have to take it in 15 minutes. And yeah, I got blasted with it. I got every friggin' symptom you could get.
Well, hey,
Okay,
man,
so
we appreciate
we'll wait
your
for
time.
you. You go take your medicine and come back.
I mean, I can continue tonight. I don't care.
Hey, no, Chris. All right.
No,
So this is what we're gonna do.
We'll let Mike schedule it.
We're gonna have to record a couple times, but we're gonna go every other week on your releases because, dude, you guys, we got a Rampage poisoning story coming up. We've got a promoter that was murdered coming up. We've got Steve Berger. We've got so much. Chris, we thank you for your time. And why don't we pick this up in a couple days and then we'll just start knocking them out. All right, brother?
Awesome. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you, man. Thank you so much. Well, another Lights Out podcast, deep dive into books. Chris Brennan, part 1.
That was
in the
pretty
books,
good.
Mike. Yeah, you said
It's just beginning too. It's just starting.
I mean, when you get a guy like that goes back to 1993, one way or another, like the real, November 12th, 1993, the first UFC has that. I mean, that's the stick in the grass. You know what I mean? That's the marker, and he's at it. So very fascinating stuff. The old names that we talked about, Kimo and Tank.
We gotta get Kimo. We gotta get Kimo.
It's very crazy stuff.
I'm gonna need to text him for Kimo's number. We're getting Kimo. Like, that was shocking. Like, I'm like a pretty big friggin' nerd when it comes to MMA. Obviously, I never knew that. Like, that's shocking to me. Now let's think about like the next episode. Brian Garrity in his interview said Rampage thought Chris was poisoning him. We've got like a murder for hire with Gerald Strebent. Interactions with Eddie Bravo. Rafael Torre, obviously, that's the guy that was part of the murder for hire. Then I think we're going to start with a promoter where him and Chris just didn't see eye to eye at the event. And it was a tournament. And Chris just withdrew from the tournament after his first fight. Personal friend that's now gone that was murdered by the bikers, Randy Greenman. We're going to get into that story. Fallout with Marco Huas. Dude, there's so much more. There's so much more. And every single fight, there's always like a caveat or something crazy that's like attached to it. We haven't even put a dent into his MMA record.
Yeah, no, he mentioned Russ Mura in the podcast. I wanted to dabble with that and the Abu Dhabi side of his career, where I actually worked with Chris. So
yeah, it's like 2005, I want to say, right?
I believe so. Yeah, the San Diego.
I got it. It's all right there, and then, dude, we're gonna get this guy greased up. we're going to get like legit Terry Trebilcock stories out of him. Not like it's the nice guy, Terry Trebilcock. We're getting it, dude. Give it a minute. We'll get there. We'll get there.
And on the Abu Dhabi side, what was fascinating to me that we found out here is he was worried. He was a last minute replacement. He was sort of worried where the seeding was going to wind up, and he wound up in a 16-man tournament, the 16th seed. It means he got Marcelo Garcia right off the bat. And he just revealed to me in this podcast that in Brazil, the very first person that tagged him out was Fabio Gurghel, Marcelo Garcia's instructor. So just little connecting the dots and stuff. It's crazy there, but he had to know what he was getting into with Marcelo. And
it is fascinating history. And to think about this, we're going to get 2 or 3, maybe probably 3 more of these. And we're going to complete Brennan because there's too much there. There's too much history there. And once we complete him, we got a list of other people that we can kind of do these multi-part series with. And I mean, if you're a fan of our podcast, you know, we've got a whole bunch of loose ends that we got to tie up, but then there's certain people that have got like 4 and 5 episodes of material. And, you know, if we don't kind of get them, we might not ever be able to.
Chris Brennan, part 1 is in the books. Definitely a doozy and a lot of good history stuff there, man. He's a little encyclopedia, as well as being an influencer from back in the day. So thanks, Chris. And we'll welcome him back for part 2 soon.
Check out the full interview on iTunes, Spotify, and all major podcast platforms.